Well, Matthew 4, we've just come out of this Sunday, maybe a bit different like this week compared to other weeks, which have probably felt a bit more heavier for the brain holding everything together. Something about Matthew 4 that just cuts straight to the heart because it's real for all of us, and it's about temptation and Jesus' temptation and then also ours. So appreciate the fact of coming in to something like that. That means we have to do heart work here. Guess curious, as you're coming in, what's been sitting in your heart, sitting in a passage like this?
So I was tempted just to skip this week. It's pretty heavy.
Skip suffering and go to glory.
There's plenty of interesting components to the way that Jesus is tempted by the devil in the wilderness. And I guess, straight off the bat, when you read it, you go, well, the Son of God is going to be able to combat temptation. What can we learn from this? Is there anything there? And the answer is quite a lot.
Indeed.
So I don't know. I guess the first thing for me, when you look at the passage, is the wilderness context. And so all of a sudden I'm thinking about Israel's time in the wilderness, thinking about Jesus as new Israel. And so you go, the wilderness is the place of temptation. Israel in particular are tempted to grumble, are tempted to build the golden calf. They're tempted to worship things other than God himself. And they're tempted to yearn for their past life in Egypt in particular. And so as you have the new Israel rock up in the wilderness, the context is kind of ringing alarm bells going, how is Jesus going to deal with this same temptation that old Israel have endured through? And he comes there. So again, that's kind of the first bit. I was like, right, as I'm curious to what God's going to do through Jesus in this passage, I'm worried the old story is going to repeat itself. Even though, I know the ending, Jesus wins, but in terms of as you place yourself in the story, sitting with that narrative is really, it's heavy.
And Matthew's been building something there for us that Jesus is seen to re-enter the very places that mark the places of Israel's failure. The wilderness, crossing the Jordan River last week. It's it is helping us to re-enter that story of Israel. This time, Jesus is the one who's repeating the story, but to be faithful and he will not fail.
And I think, first temptation is bread. 40 days without food. Hunger is a right response to lack of food. And you go, what's Jesus going to do? How's he going to respond? And I hadn't really put it together before. I thought the devil was pouncing on Jesus at this moment because of his hunger. But actually seeing hunger fasting in particular, as preparation for the temptation to come, that interplay is massive.
Jesus deliberately entered a space of deprivation and hunger in order. You were saying this, there was something crucial about he was led into the wilderness by the Spirit to go endure that sort of deprivation and that hunger, and this is his preparation. That was an application thing for us to be thinking about preparation and prepare as a category, prepare for the testing.
At first reading, you look at that and you go, I think hunger here is the problem, but I think hunger is actually Jesus' solution to that particular issue. And fasting was the means by which he was focused on God's will, focused on doing what he needs to do in this moment, rather than being distracted by all the other things that flood into your senses as you approach that temptation. Preparation's big. I think that's a big preparation for temptation is a really big category that we need to engage with. particularly, I reckon we, in general, temptation's always coming. We know temptation's coming, but I think in our heart of hearts, we just try and hope that it won't.
Mm-hmm.
We hope that we'll do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
We hope that we won't sin.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't really put any groundwork into preparing ourselves for the moment temptation comes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, you look at the, kids talk yesterday, cookie jar. Do you reach your hand into the cookie jar and take a cookie? Yes or no? That's the question. What am I going to do at that moment of temptation? And as you're standing there with your hand in the jar, that's a really bad place to be thinking, how am I going to treat this situation? Or how am I going to respond?
Yeah.
Because you're right there. The cookies are just centimetres away from your fingers.
Yeah.
And you actually viscerally feel the joy and the flavour of that cookie as it goes down. You feel the sense of satisfaction, even though it's going to last for 15 seconds. You know that satisfaction that is going to be derived from that. And you're actually weighing up against something that you know will be good in the short term versus the abstract concepts of mum might be cranky. Oh, well, mum's always cranky. Or this is going to cost me credibility in my relationship.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's future me's problem. That's not current me.
Yeah. And
current me wants to pounce on that visceral experience that I know will feel good in the moment. And that's that. Like, why don't we prepare for that?
I heard you alerting us there to just the recognition that our behaviors and actions in the moment of crisis are actually truly just the fruit of things that we've habituated in our lives and hearts, that every day we go through a certain routine and ritual to get up and get ready for work and get out the door and all these sort of things. But alongside that are choices and decisions that we make in moral moments, in relationships, and how we're engaging with ourselves and our heart, and how we're engaging with God. Every day, those sort of moments are forming in us a certain character, so that when the time of crisis comes, or a particular season that is felt to be difficult and testing in that regard, what comes out of us is actually a revelation. I heard an illustration once when someone was talking about the sin of anger, I suppose, and had a water bottle with a loose cap on the top or something like that, and shook the bottle, and water comes flying out, and it's like, why did everyone get wet just there? It was, because the cap wasn't on properly. But no, it was actually because there's water in the bottle. If there was no water in the bottle, there'd be nothing that. And in a sense, temptation or testing is a little bit like that. It reveals what's inside. That when we're shaken, what bubbles out is something that's already there and present. In a sense, testing has its way to actually reveal to us something of what's truly going on. And in that sense, becomes a grace to see it, to name it, and then to change it. But I think I was really struck by that sense of, what are the habits that we are forming in our day to day, and are we aware of how much as well we are being formed by the particular time that we live in, or the particular culture we live in, by the relationships that we cultivate, or by the things that we attend to in our minds. Like, are we aware that these are things that are actually having the feedback loop is going this way, and it's actually doing something either constructive or deconstructive to our hearts. So I appreciated that sense of alertness to the small moments and the habits of our heart that we're called to cultivate as Christian people.
Yeah, I think yesterday afternoon as I was reflecting again on the passage, the idea of like a sports team jumped into my mind. Shock horror. But there's a sense in which a sports team plays on the weekends, and they play for like an hour and a half in most games, like 90 minutes in soccer, 80 minutes in rugby. And those 80 minutes, are not the main game. Or so they are the main game, but they're not actually where the preparation bears fruit. They're the end goal. They're not actually the process to get there. And so, like, I drive around on a weeknight, and you see hundreds of kids and hundreds of adults running around practicing. They're tackling, they're kicking, or like whatever it is. But how well they train and practice on a Tuesday and Thursday night dictates how they actually will perform on the Saturday.
Yeah.
And if they're not tackling well on a Tuesday, they're not going to tackle well on a Saturday. And like phrases like practice like you play are really helpful, going, all right, well, if I don't know how to do it in my practice scenario, how am I ever going to execute that skill in the actual moment? And so I think it's really interesting that Jesus uses fasting as the mechanism by which he prepares for that temptation, because he's preparing to go without, so that when he's offered bread, which he's got his like the hand's right there, he could just reach out and grab it and turn the stone into bread. Instead, he goes, no, I've practiced for 40 days what it's like to go without bread. I can last another 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And so it's just beautiful. There's the preparation, and Jesus is practicing the way that he's going to play in that moment of temptation.
Yeah.
And there's something beautiful. Like, and I, if I'm being brutally honest, I didn't see that when we were looking at this passage 6 months ago. I haven't seen that before. It's just beautiful that God's fresh revelation to me in this particular moment is, preparation is absolutely key. We need to practice. We will play like we practice, and so therefore reverse engineering that is we actually need to practice the way we play. And so in a Christian discipleship sense, this temptation is going to be there all the time, every day, multiple times. There's any opportunity to sin, we are going to be tempted to execute that sin because we're totally depraved, right? We are not perfect people. We're not inherently good. We are made in God's image, but we're not naturally. If we're just left long enough to just do things the way that we think we should do them, we're not magically going to become perfect people over time. We're naturally going to be drawn away from God's ways by our totally depraved nature, our sinful nature, and so I think it's curious that we just regularly pretend like temptation's not a thing. And so, you can literally insert any sin, any temptation of any description, and you go, right, when I'm next presented with the temptation to eat too much food, to look at something on the internet, to be cruel to someone that I should be kind to, when I'm have a relational breakdown and I hold the grudge rather than try and heal the relationship. Why not take a moment to actually think, what will I do? And not just what will I do by my sinful nature, what would God have me do according to his will? And how do I prepare myself to try and execute that skill when I actually come into that live situation, rather than just pretending like there's no problem and then just fumbling my way into it and failing for the next 100 times I'm interact with that particular temptation. So anyway, I think pause, reflect, and think about your preparation for going into temptation.
Makes me think of like when Paul's giving his counsel to Timothy in the letter, and he does give this word to Timothy to say, like, watch over your doctrine and your life. And that's always stuck out to me as quite a significant, that part of our Christian journey and Christian formation is not just our attentiveness to like reading the Bible well, engaging with it well, growing in the knowledge of God, like in Scripture, all of this sort of stuff. But there's a partnering with that goes hand in hand with our own level of self-knowledge and self-awareness. I think becomes a piece in this story as well, that as we're each thinking about the temptations that we particularly face, or the certain trials that enter our lives in different seasons that make just the experience of life hard, part part of us engaging well is actually like fostering the kind of relationships that produce self-awareness. So my own experience in my own story is that I didn't bust out of the womb with a very good knowledge of who I am and what I'm like and my tendencies and behaviors, but it's always been the experience of relationships with others, particularly in Christian fellowship with people that I trust enough to speak the truth. And that helps me to cultivate a sense of what I'm like, where I'm likely to mess up and fail, and like how can preparation, like you can't prepare for what you don't know in that sense. And I have experienced in my own journey that we need to have those relationships that help cultivate who we are and who we're becoming. Like I remember a friend of mine in high school that one day, like out of the blue, was like, "Josiah, you're a bit of a doormat, aren't you? Like, do you just let people walk all over you all the time?" And I was just like, where did that come from? And like, funnily enough, that's not the first person that said that, but like encounters like that have become places for me to reflect on. Like, I wonder how that need to accommodate others or that need to appease others plays itself in my relationships. That means I'm just repeating the same sins over and over again. I need relationships that are truth relationships so that I can grow in my doctrine and my life. I think that. Sorry.
Oh, just like as you're saying that, you go. We can talk the talk all we like. We can actually think about what we say, what we think, what we feel. It's not enough just to talk the talk. We've got to walk the talk. And we've got to actually do that not just by ourselves in the context of community. Because if we just kind of go, oh yeah, I think I'm doing an all right job, I'm doing okay, and the people that know you best go, no, you are not. You're making the same mistakes over and over again. So yeah, that's a helpful.
I think the other thought that connects to that is just that our experience of doing life together and community together, growth group together, I think they can also help us foster a sense of where we are situated in time. As in, I think part of preparing well for temptation is also a sense of discerning the season that we're in. That so often the things that we are struggling with enter our lives in a particular season and circumstance that might change in 6 months or 12 months or 8, whatever it might be. Sometimes it's hard to actually see that trajectory and be able to name, these different things that have shifted in my life like are actually causing me a lot of angst, and I'm under a lot of stress or pressure, or I'm worried about particular things, or I'm bitter and resentful at these people in this relationship that's been a difficult thing. Like all of these things come at a certain place. I think there's something in being able to discern and name the season that we're in currently so that we can enter it with that, I guess, Godward posture of like there might be legitimate things that are happening that are like quite sad or awful, but holding on to that sense of what's God doing in this? I wonder what this is surfacing, and what I'm meant to be. What does God want me to be attentive to right now in this place? I find like I keep complaining about different seasons that come with parenting, and I'm finding that sort of thing. The question of what's God wanting to be attentive to right now that I'm missing?
That's a great segue to what I want to reflect with you last on. That last temptation of Jesus, standing up on the top of the mountain, looking out over all creation, all of the cities, whatever you call them, and Satan saying, all this I can give to you if you just bow down and worship me. Fundamentally, I think that is skipping the hard bit. So it already belongs to Jesus, although his path goes via the cross and crucifixion and resurrection. The temptation at that point is actually skipping the hard bit to go straight to the glory. And so in that very sense, we regularly complain about the stuff that is actually critical in our formation that takes us on a journey to look more like Jesus. But that is actually, the pain is part of the process. And we genuinely want to skip the pain if at all possible. That's our general posture and default as humans. And it's why things like weight loss drugs are so popular, because it's like, I don't want to spend the next 10,000 hours on the treadmill. Is there a magic pill I can pop that can take all my pain away and still get to the desired outcome? You kind of go, like relationship formation. Like, I don't want to go and meet different people in different places. I want to find an app to be able to find someone instantly to skip the painful process of relationship formation and figuring out who I are. And so many instances, like whole industries are set up to try and skip the pain,
alleviate suffering,
and get the outcome without the process. But the process actually takes us to the outcome. The process is formative, and the process is actually how we become more like Jesus. And so, I agree. I'm no stranger to complaining about being stuck in pain. But pain's part of the process, and it's something that we should really be embracing, because often it is the mechanism by which God makes us look more like his son, which should be the ultimate goal of anyone who proclaims to follow Jesus. We should want to be more like him. And so, I just love that I love that Jesus didn't skip the cross, because it means that we can be friends with God, because he died and rose again, sits at the right hand of God to judge the living and the dead. I love that. That's a beautiful picture. But it also gives me encouragement, even if that's somber encouragement, that you go, I will suffer in the future. When I suffer in the future, God is making me look more like his son, Jesus. And even if that feels awful and I hate it experientially, there is a good purpose that God is using to make me look more like his son through life. And I love that. I think there's something so significant about not dodging the pain.
It puts its finger on, like, it's our cultural gap. Like, a lot of people have commented, like, Western culture, we're not resilient with suffering. And it makes me think, like, what we have an opportunity to do in Christian community is to cultivate a certain space together that makes it plausible to enter my week. I'm weak. Like, I know the shortcomings of my heart as I enter a world and get pulled about. But there's something deeply strengthening about a shared experience, a community where we're committed to do that together. It holds the line for each other in the spaces in my heart that I might be otherwise tempted to let grow cold or be complacent in or turn a blind eye to. But the experience of a robust Christian community keeps us wrestling. I think the struggle, I think you mentioned a line, there's a space, we're called to struggle with temptation, struggle against sin and strive against it. There's a space that, perish the thought that we stop struggling, because then it means just the battle's over. As you were speaking yesterday, the verse that jumped in my mind was the verse from James, chapter 1, verse 1, or whatever it is, where he's like, consider it pure joy, my brothers, when you face trials of various kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And I go, what's my relationship to a verse like that? And I go, not a very good one. As in, I think it is a call there to struggle and to fight for joy. I don't think it's a call to put on a happy face, but I think it's a call to engage with the call to sometimes grieve really well, sometimes to name things are just not good right now, but to not give up the fight, that there is joy for us because it's all being attended to by our loving Father. And it's worth fighting for that joy because of him.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that this week's challenge is how do we prepare for the pain that we know is going to come, and so that when that temptation presents itself, we can actually execute the skills that we've been practicing, and thus honouring God with our lives in that moment, and choosing God's will over our warped, sinful, human, corrupt. So prepare for the pain.
Good call.
Yeah.